like Allison mentioned, the presentation is called Creating a Team to Carry On. And also I'm going to be talking a little bit about the letter of intent. Just want to make sure that the full screen is being shared right now, correct? Perfect. Okay, thank you. So I am a certified financial planner, as well as, and more importantly tonight, a sibling to a young man with Down syndrome. So I have two younger brothers, and my youngest does have special needs, and we as a family have worked really hard to create a team that will what we call carry on for when my parents are no longer able to do all that they're able to do. So I will share with you a little bit about our personal story, about how we worked with other families to also help to coordinate this team, and just hopefully giving you some different tips and strategies to be able to develop this. I'm happy to answer any questions in the meantime. If you want to just put something in the chat or even just start speaking, I'm happy to. I want to make sure that, again, your time is well spent here tonight. So our special needs financial planning team, we are based out of Burlington, Massachusetts, and this is the group of three of us. So this is myself, Cindy Haddad, who's also a sibling, and then my father. I joined the practice about 8 years ago after working with a few other financial advisors and doing general financial planning for retirement, education, you name it, and really just join my father because it is so important to kind of work with families like mine to navigate these complex conversations, as well as just figuring out how to financially plan for your loved one and yourself as well. So today I'm going to go over the special needs planning timeline, which I think is really important, really looking at where you are in your planning based on how old your child is and when you plan on retiring as well, the 5 factors of special needs planning, different things that you do need to consider when you are doing special needs, not just looking at, again, the numbers, the money, but also the emotions, the family and support, which again, we're going to be talking a lot more about the people tonight. And then the special needs planning guide. So this is a book that John and Cindy wrote that is also broken out by the special needs planning timeline and the 5 factors. So it's very helpful. They're actually just finalized a second version with some updates, including a little bit of information on the team to carry on and the new ABLE accounts. So it's not yet published, but should be soon. You can find this version on Amazon, and it is a great read, a little bit more like a textbook, but if you are really interested in financial planning, I'd be happy to talk with you, or please feel free to go to Amazon and look at this book. Understanding the basics, we'll go over some other items to consider, a lot of the estate planning documents, and then diving right into how to start thinking about creating the team. It definitely takes a village to provide for our loved ones, and the sooner you start thinking about who will be part of that village, the better that you and your loved one will be. And it can be very emotional, which is why, again, I'll be giving you guys some tangible different pieces of tools that you could use to kind of help formulate this group of people. So when it comes to planning, talking a little bit briefly about the financial resources, it is all about striking a balance, and every family's balance is a little bit different between what you'll have with government benefits and your personal resources. So the government resources come from, DDS, different federal funding resources as well as the personal. So sometimes we're going to think a little bit more on the personal side of things now. When you do develop a team to carry on, yes, you'll definitely have DDS, the case coordinator that you may be working with, family support providers, but a lot of times some of the personal resources will pay for some of maybe the non-formal folks that will be part of your team, or also maybe hiring a professional trustee. So thinking about who in your group and what type of people consist of your network. So then you need to identify, okay, well, am I going to have a combination of professional and personal individuals, and how, will you potentially need to compensate some of these different roles, which we'll go over a little bit later. So really important to kind of think of, what does your balance look like? Where will the resources come when your child does age out of the school system? Will you be accessing mostly government resources, or also using a combination of both? Again, every family is a little bit different. So looking at the special needs planning timeline, you can see here, looking at, kind of where you are in your planning, starting from when your child is born, if they got an early diagnosis, then being an early intervention until the age of 3, then being in the school system up until the age of 22 in many scenarios. Maybe some of your children maybe faced it a little bit earlier, did some type of education, college, before they completely phased out at the age of 22. So age 14 is a really big one if you guys are, if there's anyone younger in that age period, because that is when you start thinking about when someone turns age 22, what transition planning should look like. And then another really, really big pressure point is at age 18, when your child is technically no longer a child, and from the government's perspective, so they may be able to access some different government resources, and then also thinking about guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, which is another role that you potentially may need to fill if they are not able to, serve as their own guardian and need someone. That's a formal role that we'll be talking more about, and who serves as that, and where can you find maybe different people that can help with that role and taking over. So again, age 22, thinking of employment, what are they going to do during the day once they're no longer in school? What does transportation look like? So a lot of people really think of, okay, where's my child going to live and what are they going to do during the day? Usually focus on what they're going to do, and then maybe later learning some different transition skills, helping them to be more independent, so that when they do phase out of maybe living in the parent home, that they don't need quite as many supports as what they did when they lived in the parent's home. I know my little brother is much more likely to do something for someone else than if my parents ask him or if I ask him to do something. So it's nice to kind of have a little bit of a transition when maybe somebody else other than mom, dad, siblings comes in and helps to teach, well, this is the way that you brush your teeth, right? Or this is how you prepare your breakfast in the morning, because that really will help with the ongoing supports that the individual will need, and many times what the resources will also need for the future. So thinking of retirement as well, and when a parent goes to retire, many times there is, if the child's not able to be gainfully employed, the adult individual is able to also collect some Social Security income based on the parent's retirement. So there may be additional income coming in at that point that you can use for some of those different supports. But again, we have a whole other presentation that's focused on the financial piece, which if anybody has any questions here, I'd be happy to talk with you about as well. And then thinking about the estate plan, and then when a parent passes away, and funding of your estate, the special needs trust, usually this is when it is funded at both parents' death. Special needs trust is funded, and that's when you really need to identify who the trustee is, who the different guardians may be, and maybe the overall support team, which could again consist of formal and informal roles. So going on to the next slide. So the 5 factors, especially is financial planning. So when John and Cindy were writing the book, they took a step back and thought, well, it really isn't just about the money, and it really isn't just about the government benefits, which is also another form of resource for the family, but it has to do with the legal factors. So that is the guardianship, the estate planning documents. Even more important is the family and support. So if you don't have individuals that you can name into these legal documents, well, the money also that you saved all these years may not be spent for your child in the way that you'd want it to be spent, or, and really what you want is the resources to transfer into fun stuff and a really great life for your loved one. So you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have a trustee that knows what your child needs, well, that money will really just sit there and not be spent on your child's behalf. So it takes a lot of work. You need to build a vision and create this vision for your loved one and be able to pass it on to the next generation as well. So it's important to obviously do what you need to do to build those financial assets to be able to pay for the people that may be part of your ongoing team, as well as in addition to provide for some of those supports. And the emotional factors, I think this is probably one of the most emotional topics that we talk about is creating this team to carry on, because there really isn't anyone that will be able to do everything that you do like the way that you do it right now, but a team usually can be developed to replace a lot of what you do, and hopefully close to the expectations that you set for these individuals. And by handing them these different tools, you really set them up to be able to, for you to be able to pass the baton to them. So thinking of those different factors and focusing on one thing at a time, it can be very overwhelming when you look at all of this and think, oh my goodness, where do I even start? Well, being here tonight is a great place, and I'm going to give you again some different tools that you can use. So legal factors, the biggest thing when you do think of your estate plan, you really want to make sure that you work with somebody that knows special needs planning. There are a lot of attorneys out there. Not many of them focus in special needs. So special needs and elder planning, if there's an attorney that knows elder planning, usually they also know special needs planning. There's a couple different organizations too that you may consider going to their website, because they do list list of attorneys that focus in this. One's the Special Needs Alliance and one's the Academy of Special Needs Planners. So they'll usually the advisors that are in those groups have an area of focus of special needs. The next most important thing is keeping your documents current. So there was a big change last year in the way that individuals with special needs and non-special needs inherit retirement accounts. So if most of your savings is in a retirement account and your estate plan is several years old, you may want to reach out to your estate planning attorney just to make sure that it complies with the Secure Act and that your trust will be able to stretch the distributions from the retirement account. So really important, just quick little to do if you've drafted your documents several years ago, especially if you have other children. In the past, we've seen many attorneys enable distributions to potentially be made for another sibling out of the special needs trust, and that would disqualify this trust from being able to qualify for an exception with the Secure Act. So don't want to go too into the nitty-gritty. But again, just really want to make sure that if you have drafted one that you contact them to get that potentially updated. And then another really important thing is you could have the most beautiful estate plan in the entire world, but if you don't update the beneficiaries on your retirement accounts, on the life insurance policies, the annuities if you have them, well, guess what? It doesn't matter who is in or how your estate plan is drafted. It really only depends on who is listed as your beneficiary on those different accounts. So really important to review that as often as possible, especially if you have old 401k plans that maybe you haven't looked at for a while. Revisit those beneficiaries to make sure they're up to date, especially if you make any changes to your estate plan or you're remarried or anything like that. Really important. So thinking of the different estate planning documents, you have every single person should have a will, a healthcare proxy, and a power of attorney. So this should also be potentially for your adult child as well. If they are able to make their own decisions and have any assets of their own, you likely would want a will for them, just like you have a will for your personal assets. A healthcare proxy is the person that would step in to make medical decisions. This would be a person that would make medical decisions for you if you were to be in an accident, so that somebody wouldn't have to go and get guardianship for you. So really important, think of yourself and making sure that you have these documents in place. We've met with a lot of families that have met with an estate planning attorney and had the healthcare proxy, power of attorney drafted for their adult child, but not for themselves. So really important, again, get these documents done. And then in addition, if your child, I know a lot of your children may have autism and may not need the full guardianship, which would remove pretty much any rights that your child had to be able to enter into a contract, to be able to do social events. It really limits their ability to make healthcare decisions. You'd be the one stepping in. In many cases, it makes sense. It's needed. My brother has full guardianship, so it's not a bad thing. But what you want to do is look first to see if a power of attorney and healthcare proxy would be appropriate, and then looking at guardianship if power of attorney and healthcare proxy is not the right fit. So healthcare proxy and power of attorney would be the right fit if your child is able to and aware to say, I do want my parents to help me make these decisions. I want my mom to go to the doctor with me and help me with my medication or with scheduling my doctor's appointments. And then same thing for power of attorney would really be the person that helps with signing a lease if they're going to live somewhere or opening up a bank account, those different types of financial decisions. Healthcare proxies for the individual from a health perspective, medical perspective, and then also a HIPAA. HIPAA would release the medical documents to the individual that maybe is serving as healthcare proxy. So they'd be able to look at the background, the history, and then make a decision on what medical care is needed. So again, you would need that in your adult child with special needs potentially. And then there's different types of special needs trusts. So the most common is the third party special needs trust. So that's the trust that you set up in advance. So when you go meet with an estate planning attorney, they would suggest that you create a third party. So you think a third person, that's you, other than your child, setting this up for your child as the beneficiary. And in your special needs trust, you'll need to name a trustee. That's the person that's responsible to oversee the funds, has a fiduciary responsibility to distribute and invest. and again, make sure that everything is being followed and they are paying for things and they're providing for the beneficiary. So that's their sole job, is to provide for the beneficiary and make sure they're handling the assets in a fiduciary manner. And the third party trust is a discretionary trust, which means the money can be spent for almost anything. There is language in there not to supplant government benefits, but to supplement. So if your child is on a Section 8, for example, then the special needs trust should not pay for housing. There is other ways that you could pay for additional housing expenses, such as using an ABLE. So that's, again, a little bit more on the financial side, but just to be aware, that's really what a third party special needs trust is for it to supplement different benefits that your child's receiving, but not to replace them. But it is fully discretionary. So if the trustee thinks that it's in the beneficiary's best interest to take a distribution, maybe pay for a home or pay for housing, then that can be done. It just may offset what they receive in Section 8. So usually it's important that you work with someone that is familiar with special needs law and different types of distributions. But again, you can have a team, maybe a person, we'll go over that a little bit more. You can have a team of people, maybe it doesn't have to be just one person serving as trustee, but it could be a sibling alongside a professional as well, or a family friend along with the professional, to get some guidance on an ongoing basis, or a couple times a year, to make sure that whatever systematic distributions are coming out are appropriate. OBRA, first party trust. So that's usually a trust that's funded if parents or someone else did not do estate planning in advance. Say a grandparent passed away and they named your child as a beneficiary on their retirement accounts, and your child is receiving benefits. There is a way to take that asset that they inherit and put it into a first party trust. Think of the first party, that's the individual, putting it into that type of trust, and then they would automatically be eligible for benefits the month following. However, there are a little bit more restrictions on how that money can be spent. And if they are receiving any funds from Medicaid, Medicaid would be reimbursed from that, anything left in that trust account upon your child passing away. So worse things could happen. Obviously, if there is money left to your child, it's a wonderful thing. You can use that money for your child's behalf during their lifetime. And then pooled trust is another type of trust. If you really don't have any family that you'd want, or you can't think of who you would not want to name, family, friends, to serve as trustee, pooled trusts are another option that are run by nonprofit organizations, like the Plan of Massachusetts offers one, Plan of Mass in Rhode Island, and they serve as trustee, they manage the money, and they also will give you a social worker. So there is a little bit of a higher annual cost potentially, but it's a wraparound full service. You get all of those, kind of different pieces if you were to use a pooled trust. So some people really like to go that route, especially if it's not a huge amount of resources, where it may be a little bit more simple to use a pooled trust in a situation like that. And typically there is the payback provision on those pooled trusts, or a piece would go to the nonprofit if your child passes away. Each pooled trust works a little bit different. So happy to pass on the names of some different pooled trusts if you'd like as well. Guardianship and Alternatives. So that's where, going back to the power of attorney. So guardianship is if your child is really not able to make any of their own decisions. So my brother really needs someone to be there to go to the doctor with him to make sure that he's getting the right type of care, and he really wouldn't be able to advocate for himself if he were in the doctor. So he needs someone there with him. So, really the good thing is in Massachusetts, there is forms of limited guardianship too. So if they only need assistance in some areas, you can kind of check it off and then have them be their own individual in other areas as well. Any questions there, or no? So understanding government benefits. So there's two different types, and I'm going to go by this quickly because there's the federal funded, which is the SSI, the SSDI, the Section 8s, and then there's non-entitlement. So what's really important here is that for your team, that they know what types of benefits your child is receiving to make sure that they maximize them and don't do something to potentially disqualify. And the non-entitlement, so that's funded by the state by appropriation. So that is the DDS, the DMH, the MRCs of the world, which you are identified when you go with the 688 transition when you're in school. So when you're in school, age between 14 and 22, you'll be the school will tell you and introduce you to the agency that will be serving your child through age 22 and beyond, and really important to maintain those relationships as time goes on. And will there be enough money? So thinking of the financial factors, like we talked a little bit about, is thinking of, well, will there be enough money for both me as well as for my child? And how much money will it take for my child to have a good life? And where will the money come from? So this is all very individualized to each family, just because each child's abilities are very different, and what you spend as a family, as well as what your income and what your assets look like. So we have a different kind of schedule that we review and say, okay, well, where is the funding going to come from? Where should you be spending your time? And how do you maximize these different resources? And again, the most important thing is that you create a vision for your child. You know, for my little brother, if he had a couple cans of Coke throughout the week, he'd be the happiest person in the entire world, and obviously having us in his life too. So just thinking about what makes your child's life great, and then really working towards that, because it may be a combination of using, again, these government resources as well as some personal resources to do the fun stuff, maybe once a year trip to Disney, or maybe a couple times a year going to the movie theaters. Again, it really is all individualized to each family, and really figuring out what it is that makes your child's life so much fun and so great, and continuing that. So the most important thing is communication, is talking to the other people that are going to be part of your team to carry on, and how are the roles going to transfer. It can be very hard to have conversations with others because they may also have input, thinking, well, you know, for example, my brother has changed day programs a couple different times, and now we as a family kind of go through, maybe look at go for a tour of the day program, and we all have our own thoughts, our own feelings, and we have to agree, along with my brother, that this is the best place for him to go. So obviously, if more people are involved, there could be a little bit more disagreements, more communication. So I think the sooner that you start having these discussions, the better, because then we can all get each other's viewpoint too, and oftentimes that does end up in a better result, and able to kind of, you know, work together to then create that team, so that there isn't issues down the road, especially if there are more than one sibling involved that will be potentially stepping in. Having family meetings and having these difficult conversations. I know the first time that I asked my father, you know, what's going to happen when something happens to the both of you? It's different being a sibling your entire life. You know, okay, well, if something does happen, I know it is going to fall on me. Not that it's a bad thing, but it is just, it's life. I don't know anything different than living and knowing my little brother since, you know, I was 4 years old when he was born. I don't remember anything before him. So it's just, again, part of a sibling's life, where it is very different from when a parent kind of gets the diagnosis and realizes, oh my gosh, my life is going to be very different now going forward, different than what you ever expected, I'm sure. So just having those conversations with siblings, I think we can be a little bit more blunt and say, like, okay, it is what it is. Like, let's just talk about it. And I think a lot of parents don't want to burden is often the word that's used, the adult siblings, but also at the same time, a lot of other professionals will say, well, you know, you don't want to name the adult siblings to be part of the plan because there's potentially a conflict. But I think really having a conversation and making sure that the siblings are empowered to be able to take over some responsibilities, if that is the wishes of the parents, of the individual themselves, and of the siblings. And it may ebb and flow. There may be years when a sibling can be really involved. There may be years when a sibling can't be involved because they may have their own responsibilities as well. So figuring out, you know, who will fill those shoes. So this is a fun little picture here. This was our wedding over the summer. So this is my brother James, my husband, and my brother Ben. So, you know, who will fill the shoes? Obviously, our families are expanding and expanding. One of the kind of, you know, when I started dating my now husband, I wanted to make sure that he was comfortable with, you know, James and our whole family, because it is a little bit different, more responsibilities that may come down the road. He happens to be the youngest of 7, which kind of helps with family stuff. He knows that, you know, a large family, obviously there comes difficult conversations at times, and responsibility for one another. So thinking of who will be part of your support group, the family and support factors, is family members and friends. You know, a lot of people say, well, I don't have one person that can do all that I do. Again, it really is about creating this full team that can carry on. So we also have a lot of families that are part of different CPACs growing up, that with their young children, and now they're part of their team going forward. Maybe not in a very formal role, but if there comes an issue with maybe the day program or some type of service, that a sibling or someone else that does have a more formal ongoing role could call them up and kind of go through what problem that they're having, and walk them through it because they've probably gone through it a few times, or maybe a sibling hasn't had to do that type of level of hands-on advocating. Doctors, nurses, specialists, you name it. One really helpful way to determine who should be part of your team is by having a person-centered plan. So I know for our family, we did 2 person-centered plans. Usually it's you have them when there is some type of transition. So you're trying to figure out maybe what will your child do during the day, or what type of work will they really enjoy doing. There was one story where they got a bunch of people together, and this young individual wasn't really safe, or not yet safe, wasn't going to be able to be safe driving on the road, but he really liked to drive. So they thought, well, guess what? I think that he'd be great to be a driver at a driving range at a golf course, because he's in a golf cart that's completely enclosed. No one's on the driving range with him. He'd be able to zigzag as much as he want, drive around as much as he want. And guess what? They all come up with this really creative idea for him to be able to get this job at a driving range. So I think just the more people that you get together, like I talked about a little bit earlier, everyone has different experiences with your loved one, and getting everybody into one room, a lot of thoughts can be tossed around. And people also may say, well, I really want to be part of your child's life, which may surprise you depending on the level of communication your child can share with you. So for us, for example, we had our hairdresser. She cuts all of our family's hair, and she started to cry and was really excited to actually be able to, she was honored to even be part of that night, and said that she really would love to spend some time with James, maybe once a quarter, to take him out. So that really meant a lot to all of us, because it is about those relationships that aren't paid relationships, or maybe that are. It could be okay, it could be a combination, but again, it really is, we want to have people in our life that really care about us, and that is what makes our life so great. So thinking about how to continue to nurture those relationships and include those informal roles in your letter of intent potentially. So, the state and local advocacy agency, like the different individuals that you meet through advocates, really important. Maybe talking to them, seeing if somebody would be willing again to kind of get to know your child a little bit more, or even just hold on to your letter of intent so that they can pass on the vision that you have, your child's story as well. Professionals, so there are a lot of professionals out there that can serve in some capacity, whether trustee, professional guardians, social workers, you name it, can be included in your team as well. Maybe maybe you have someone that helps with coordinate all of your child's medical care. That person would be really important. There are different agencies actually out there that can attend your child's doctor's appointments along with you and your child. So there is somebody else that knows, especially if it is complex, just so that you can have someone else, because you do want someone to make sure that they know what medications your child is taking, what they're allergic to, so that there aren't any accidents down the road, and they are getting the best care that they possibly can be getting, even if you're no longer there to kind of join those different meetings with them. And then that person can report back to the guardian. The guardian doesn't have to be the one taking the child to the doctor's appointments either. It can be someone else that then again reports back to the guardian. So many times we do see guardians living in the same state. Professional trustees can almost be anywhere, or trustees can be anywhere, because you can pay for things online these days. And again, maybe hire a social worker to go visit the individual, or a family friend can go visiting and reporting back to the trustee. So like I talked a little bit about, no one can really replace what you do, but the team can carry on. And one of the first steps in thinking about how to incorporate your team, or how to build your team, is to start just thinking of what do you do every single day, and what different roles will need to be replaced. So maybe start by, a weekly basis. What did you do this week for your loved one? And then thinking about, well, what did I do then on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, and then on an annual basis. I know for guardianship, there is an annual care report that needs to be completed. If your child is receiving Social Security and receiving wages, then a lot of times that needs to be reported onto an app. So just outline all these different items, and then it's a lot easier to then think about, well, who would be the best person in your network to be able to replace and do some of those different job tasks that you have right now. I know one thing, my mom is like the best cook ever, so we're always worried, oh my gosh, who's going to be able to cook for James as good as her? But we'll try the best that we can, and he's learning how to cook a little bit himself. But again, just thinking about all those different things, and then continuing to grow your child's skills as well as time goes on. So usually the team consists of these three things: of family, of friends, and of professionals. And then there are a lot of families that don't have siblings, and we actually have some families that we feel they're a little bit lucky not to have siblings, because sometimes the siblings can cause a little bit of drama. So it's a good and bad thing. You know, I think it's take it as it is at different times. So and also some siblings may not be able or may not want to be involved, which is okay. I think it really is just extremely important to have the conversation so that you're not in your late years thinking that someone is going to take over some responsibilities, and then when it actually comes time that they're not able or willing to. We've had a couple of situations where the parents maybe over the years made gifts to an adult child, thinking that one day they would step in to take over what the parents were doing, and then when they were in their late 90s, they said, I just can't do this. This is way too much. I'm leaving. And they moved out of state. And we ended up fortunately being able to hire a professional guardian, hire a professional trustee, and some different social workers that were able to kind of continue. And then there was another sibling that was living out of state that now oversees everything, but doesn't have the day-to-day responsibility since they are obviously out of state, and also we're not able to do all of that because of their personal situation too, but they have control. So there are professionals, but if the professional wasn't doing their job, then the adult sibling could fire those different people and hire new people as well. So again, if you're using all personal contacts, then maybe that's not going to be as large of a cost, but it's extremely important that you're able to pass on what you want for your adult child. So here are the different formal roles that are out there: guardian, the alternatives to guardianship. So that's the power of attorney that we talked about, and the healthcare proxy, because those are signed documents. So the guardian is in your will. So that's where you appoint who you'd want to be your successor. It isn't an automatic appointment, so they do need to go through the same process that you went through if your child is under guardianship. Another option is, as you get older, you may want to go back to court and have your adult child or whoever else you would like to name as guardian in the future take over and step in potentially as co-guardian with you, so that when you pass away, that person will automatically and still remain as the guardian versus having to go back to court. So some people do go about it that way. Another is the trustees. The trustee is in the trust document. So that is an automatic appointment because you name the trustee, it is your trust. And you can have co-trustees, you can have a team. Some people have committees. So it doesn't have to be just one person. You can have one person in charge of the distributions. That'd be the person that probably knows your child best because they would know what your child needs. You could have one person in charge of the investments. That may be a financial professional. You can have one person be in charge of the annual tax return. So again, it really is as simplified or as complex as you'd want to have it based on your personal situation. Financial professional, usually we suggest working with someone not only while the trust is funded, but before, to figure out, well, how much money do I need to put into the special needs trust to be able to provide for your adult child, and also planning for yourself too, to make sure that you have the resources that you need for your retirement years. And then some of those informal roles, so that's a case manager, care manager, so that is maybe from DDS or from DMH, you name it, someone there, or you can even hire a care manager that maybe knows your situation a little bit more. So there are some different agencies right now that are rolling out with some different types of programs. I believe AANE is one with Jay O'Brien, and he is creating a network where you can have somebody check in on your child maybe once or twice a week, or more frequently. There's 3 different tiers, and it is private pay right now, but you can have somebody visit maybe even on holidays. If there is any family that's close by, there can be a surrogate family that they would go and spend some time with. So there are a lot of different options that are developing out there where you can hire people to kind of step in and do some of the different things that you're doing. But we also always want to have maybe one person that does have some control to be able to change things, or again, hire or fire different professionals if things do aren't going the way that you would intend or you wanted them to go, and the conversations that you had with the other with that person. Different coaches, companions, social workers. We had a young a young woman many years ago. She was in high school and we were in middle school, elementary school, and she really knew that she wanted to work with kids with special needs. So she ended up taking us out on a regular basis, and she's still part of our family. Actually, when I was in college, she went on family vacations with my family, and really, she's just someone that is close to our heart and will always be part of my little brother James's life. So really, thinking of those different people that if you have them in your life, and trying to include them in different family gatherings that you have as much as possible, maybe offering to take them out a couple times a year or whatever it may be. I think really those non-paid or just relationships that your child has are so important to try to nurture those as much as possible is really key. Or social workers. I know there's a lot of social workers out there that obviously do this in the goodness of their heart, and a lot of times they form really long-term relationships, and kind of keeping them in your network too, because they know your child a little bit differently. Like, for example, we had a family that hired a social worker to go visit their someone's adult brother, and they visited them a few times, but just didn't have the background to know what to look for. So this one person was sleeping on a bed that was way too short for them. They were really tall, and it was just too small of a bed. So the social worker said, we really need to get them a bigger bed. Like, this doesn't make any sense. They're not comfortable. They're not sleeping well through the night because of this. So just having a different set of eyes, different lens that they look through, and obviously different professional experience too, which can be very helpful. So you really want to set up these professionals to succeed. So having conversations with them, now if your loved one is young, it may not make sense to have that frequent of a meeting, with these individuals. But of course, if you are naming them in your estate plan, you definitely want to let them know. So it isn't a surprise. So they can't ask you the questions that they have before taking over any responsibility in the future, and let them know what your expectations are, because obviously that would be really important as well. So and then introduce them to each other. So the person-centered plan is a great way. So I'll take a step back, because you actually may not know what a person-centered plan is. So you have a facilitator that comes into your home, and they kind of help to navigate the discussion and guide the conversation to go over whatever the goal is for that night. So whether it is to figure out what your child would like to do for work, or who should these different individuals be, and what are people's different skill sets to be part of the team to carry on. So usually, you're not going to have maybe doctors are very smart, but if you have like a nurse as a one of your children, and then you have a financial planner as your other child, you probably wouldn't have the nurse serve as the trustee and the financial planner serving as the guardian. You want to think about, what are their skill sets? What would they be most comfortable with? And how can you set them up to be successful? How can you help to pass the baton? Potentially having them join different meetings that you have, like the ISP meetings, or maybe doctor's appointments, or just making sure that you are having discussions if anything changes with their supports or with their abilities, or just having these ongoing conversations are so important. And completing the letter of intent, I would say, is probably one of the most important things. And what our letter of intent is, it goes along with the estate planning documents, and it really is a brain dump. Just think about if you were to leave your home for a couple of hours, what you'd want to write down for someone on behalf of your loved one. If you need to, make sure that they shut off the stove every single night, or make sure that they, go to bed before 10 o'clock, or they're really not in the good mood the next day, or kiss them good night, tuck them in, whatever it may be. You really want to make sure that you pass on that story, and the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty as well, to make sure that someone else knows all the information that you have, because there is a ton up in there that you need to share with someone else that will be stepping in to any role that you may have. So we have a letter of intent on our website. It's about 44 pages. It is very comprehensive. You can put in as much or as little as you'd like, but obviously the more that's in there, the better the person that will be taking over reading that document. And we often suggest that you, after completing it, sit down with the individual and go over it so that they feel comfortable needing to take over anything. And, there may be people that didn't cheerlead your loved one over the years, and that you may not want them to reach out to for whatever reason. So that's another place that you can put that. So it isn't a legal binding document. It is a tool that you can use, again, to pass information, but a really helpful tool. I know I remember when I sat down with my mom several years ago, I thought that I was like the best sibling in the entire world. I knew everything there was to know about my little brother. And then I sat down with my mom and I was like, oh my goodness, my eyes almost popped out of my head thinking, I can't believe that you do this all the time. This is many, many years ago now. Obviously been working with families for many years, and I give all the parents out there a ton of hugs and kudos, because it is a full-time job, never stops. Even when you're sleeping, I'm sure you're thinking about this, which is why I think this letter of intent is even more important. So it is broken down by those 5 factors. So depending on what mood you're in, can start kind of anywhere with the document. It is a fillable PDF that, again, we have on our website. I'd be happy to send it to Pam after too, so she can send it out to anyone that would be interested in completing it. We also just recently created a parent's guide that goes along with it, just to kind of give you some explanations to how to work through that document before, because it can be a little bit intimidating. But again, very, very helpful for siblings and anyone else. So when you do develop your plan, you do want checks and balances. We really don't like to see plans that only have professionals involved, but instead maybe someone from the community, even a neighbor. You never know. They don't have to be the one, again, doing day-to-day responsibilities at all, but just maybe getting annual statements and reviewing, making sure distributions are coming out on behalf of your loved one. It can be really as custom as your individuals that you have in your network. So really looking at those people, what are their strengths, and how could they be incorporated into the plan? So, thinking about that. In Massachusetts, just one thing to be aware of. We love all of our attorneys out there, but we have found that there, in many situations, if you're not sure who you want to name as trustee, we've seen a lot of law offices write themselves in as trustee. If that's not what you want, just make sure that you have that conversation and think long and hard before meeting with an estate planning attorney about the people. That is the hardest decision. They could have some solutions, some answers for you, but again, it really is your personal network that only you really know. And I think going through the process of creating the letter of intent, having a person-centered plan, having family meetings, attending ISPs, that really is the way to kind of identify those key people. And they may change too. As you get older, your loved one gets older, you may identify new people, or you may decide to remove different people from your plan, and that's okay. I think this is an evolving, ongoing, plan that you'll have as time goes on, and be comfortable with change. I think especially having loved ones with special needs, we're used to change, so this is okay, this changes too. And that's why we suggest looking at the letter of intent about once a year and updating it wherever you can. It, again, not a legal document. It does just take some of your time. And then you can share this with as many people as you'd like. And by doing that, it does relieve a lot of this stress, because you are writing these different things down. I don't know how many of you have like a notebook next to your bed, or wake up in the middle of the night sending emails to people because of what you're thinking. This is another way to kind of help relieve some of that stress that you may have, and share your loved one's story. So another thing that we've heard often about, maybe your child loves to travel and they've been to a lot of different places, but they really like the warm weather instead of the cold weather, maybe the cold weather instead of the warm weather. Well, maybe in the letter of intent, you write all the different places that they've gone, and maybe places they want to go back to, because my brother wouldn't be able to share all the places with his words that he's gone to over the years, but we would be able to write that into the letter of intent. Or for Christmas, he likes to have a Slinky, but he doesn't play with Slinkies anymore. So if we weren't there to tell him, nobody would know that he wants that Slinky, but he'd be digging for it for probably the entire day, if not longer. So really want to make sure that if we're not here, that he gets that Slinky every single year. And again, just kind of filling out that letter of intent, removing some of the stress, the uncertainty, the fear. And this is just an example of some of the different sections that are in the letter of intent. So, the preferences that they have, the fun stuff, the personal care information, the habits and hygiene, and meals and dietary requirements, daily routines, family information, goes on and on and on. So just think again, like just looking at this, I'm sure you think, well, wow, there's really not one central place where I have all this information. I know my mom used to have kind of a big binder where everything was, but it was helpful to just kind of walk through that binder with her in addition to complete that letter of intent and have contact information too. You know, a lot of what we talk about with our financial planning clients is, well, where is a list of all your financial assets? Do you have a consolidated list, and who has that list? And do they have our contact information? Well, this is just as important, if not more, because it is about a person that may not be able to share all of this, is the lifetime of knowledge that you've learned that it's so important to pass on. And again, it just is so helpful to those individuals that will be stepping in. So combination, siblings, professionals, there are a lot of professionals out there. There are professional social workers that serve as guardians. So if you're not sure who you'd like to step in one day and think that, oh my goodness, I don't have any close family or friends or that I would feel comfortable taking on any of these responsibilities, I'd be happy to talk with you and go over some different professional options that are also out there. Same thing with trustees. So again, usually we see some type of combination, and then working with that individual as time goes on, as you get older, having somewhat more frequent meetings with the person to make sure that they do feel comfortable as time goes on. And so the next step is really, you know, creating that vision, creating a person-centered plan and that letter of intent, and then establish a financial framework. So review your financial assets and then gather the people in the network, because you want to look at what financial assets you have first to see, well, do I have the resources that I may need to pay for some professionals to be a part of my team? And then, you know, gathering the people, bringing them together, have regular meetings with them, and then continue to monitor this. So we suggest at least, you know, annually to review everything, make sure that you're still on course with what your plan looked like last year moving forward, because things always change. We know that more than ever after last year. So again, just making sure that you're communicating with the key players as part of your plan. So that's my presentation for the day. And I have a couple minutes for questions. So I know we talked a lot about the money, but it really is, again, we talked a lot about actually tonight about creating that enriched life, the support team, and building that team to carry on. So we have a ton of information on our website, specialneedsplanning.com, including the letter of intent, as well as other housing checklists and 5-factor checklists and trustee toolkits. So you can spend quite a bit of time on there navigating a lot of free resources, and I'm always available, happy to answer any questions related to your personal situation if you'd like as well.
I have a question. You've mentioned talking to the sibling of our son, and what age would be appropriate to do that?
Good question. So you can offer to have them, you know, be part of some maybe meetings that you have for your, I'm not sure, how old is your child right now, if you don't mind me asking?
She's 21.
21, and then the sibling?
Which one? The sibling is 21. The child is 19. The one with the disability.
Okay. So oftentimes, you know, around that age, I think is when children start to maybe ask questions or think a little bit more. Everyone is very different. And you may offer to just let them know that you are thinking about this planning and ask them if they have any questions, and that they are, you know, able to be included in some of these conversations. I know I kind of came out right and just asked. I was probably a little bit older than that. I knew that my mom and dad were very, very involved in the disability community, and my father was a financial planner. So I wasn't worried per se, but we just never had the talk. So I think it's just offering to have a conversation to see if they have any questions. I don't think there's any age that's too early or too young, or too old rather. So I guess it really just depends on the person themselves, and maybe just, again, letting them know that you are doing planning, that you're thinking about this. And then if they want to know anything, that you're an open book and happy to share that, I think would give them some peace of mind at least. And letting them know like where the important documents may be. And then, you know, if they are part of the plan, obviously you should talk to them as soon as possible, especially if they do have some type of formal role in the overall plan.
Yeah.
We also have something on our website called the SIB tips, which may be something that you could use to start the conversation, or also that you're completing a letter of intent. And if you wanted to review it with your child, I think that that can be, you know, maybe you start with the soft stuff, like what your son or daughter does during the day. And that may be a very easy way to start that conversation, and then allow them to ask questions. And if they're not interested, then maybe it's not quite yet time, but that you have all of this stuff documented so that if it is time that they need to step in, that they'll have the resources and information that they need. Perfect. Any other thoughts, or?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hope this was helpful. Either no questions means that I totally lost everyone, or that I answered everybody's questions.
I think everyone is still here, but if anyone has any other questions, they can unmute themselves.
I did have a question. You referred to a book at the beginning, the Special Needs Planning Guide, and you said something about to be published soon, but then you also said it's also on Amazon. Is there a new version? What's on Amazon now? Can I get the book now, or when will the book be published?
Yes, so there's the first version that is available on Amazon, and the second one is not yet published, and probably won't be for a few months. So, and there's not much change. There's been the Able account that has recently been established, and then also talking a little bit about the team to carry on. But this planning guide that's on Amazon right now is a great resource.
Okay, and it's called the Special Needs Planning Guide?
Correct.
That's it, okay. And who's the author?
John Nadworny and Cynthia Haddad.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.